Paul's looking at me. It's 6:30. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Genoa Township Board of Trustees meeting. This is a special zoning meeting. Today's date is March 21st, 2023, and the time is 6:30 p.m. At this time, I'll ask Joe Schaefer to call the roll.
Roll call, Trustee Goodman.
Here.
Trustee Vaughn.
Here.
Trustee Antonetts. Here.
Also present, we have Joe Schaefer, the Director of Development and Zoning, and we also have Paul Benson, the Deputy Zoning Inspector. This meeting of the Genoa Township Trustees will be recorded. The meeting audio and written minutes will be available on Genoa Township's website at www.genoatwp.com or by contacting Genoa's fiscal office. Case number ZC 202302-02, Comprehensive Plan Amendment. The meeting was called to order. Did I do this again? I have to open it up? Okay, so I'll call the following meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. And I'll read the legal notice. Genoa Township Zoning Commission initiated Comprehensive Plan Amendment ZC 2023-02 to the January 7th, 2019 revision of the 2016 Genoa Township Comprehensive Plan to update land use and density recommendations in designated planning areas, Chapter 4, and the Comprehensive Plan Map. Delete outdated text, Chapter 5, and update actions which have been completed since the previous plan, Chapter 5. The legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on January 8th, 2023 in the Delaware Gazette and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on March 3rd, 2023. The following were marked as Exhibits A through I. Exhibit A, legal notice. Exhibit B, affidavit of advertisement. Exhibit C, sign-in sheet. Exhibit D, comprehensive plan amendment dated February 27th, 2023. Exhibit E, DCRPC recommendation made February 23rd, 2023. Exhibit F, trustee acknowledgement of the Zoning Commission's recommendation made on March 2nd, 2023. Exhibit G, staff PowerPoint presentation. Exhibit H, staff memo dated March 21st, 2023. Exhibit I, all public comments received between January 17th, 2023 and March 1st, 2023. At this time, I'll move to continue the public hearing for the subject comprehensive plan amendment dated February 27th, 2023, also known as ZC case number 2023-02 until April 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the Township Hall. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Was that 6 or 6:30?
6:30. Did I say 6?
I thought I heard 6.
Okay.
Maybe you did.
Just for
Maybe
clarification purposes, 6:30 p.m.
Also, as you were reading, the legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on March 8th. I believe you said January.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank you.
also Exhibit I, all public comments received between January 17th, 2023 and March 21st, 2023.
Thank you.
There was
the
I think
corrections.
it was marked, yeah.
Okay,
I don't
thank
remember
you.
what it was, but
All right, I'll amend everything as stated by Trustee Goodman. Do we need to re-second it?
Second.
Thank you. Just in case.
No, I just point of clarification. We'll make sure. I think Connie
Okay.
seconded
I
it.
had second.
We'll make
She
sure.
had seconded it, yes.
Well, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Okay, very good. Roll call?
Roll call, Trustee Antonetts. Yes. Trustee Goodman.
Yes.
Trustee Vaughn.
Yes.
Okay, so April
Motion
20th,
carries.
6:30 p.m.
Yep. So I will move to close this hearing at 6:34 p.m. Do I need a second?
You don't need to make a motion for that. It's just.
Okay. All right, so next we have case number ZC 2023-03, zoning text map amendment. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. and read the legal notice. Genoa Township Zoning Commission initiated zoning resolution amendment ZC 2023-03 to reflect and comply with the provisions of the Ohio Revised Code, Article 1, revise certain definitions, Article 4, modified density regulations, Article 7, 9, and 14, increase certain minimum lot sizes, Article 8, and supplement divergences, review standards, Article 27, along with various amendments related to such revisions for the purposes of consistency, clarity, accuracy, and proper administration. The legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on March 8th, 2023 in the Delaware Gazette and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on March 3rd, 2023. The following were marked as Exhibits A through I. Exhibit A, legal notice. Exhibit B, affidavit of advertisement. Exhibit C, sign-in sheet. Exhibit D, zoning text map amendment dated February 27th, 2023. Exhibit E, DCRPC recommendation made February 23rd, 2023. Exhibit F, trustee acknowledgement of the zoning commission's recommendation made on March 2nd, 2023. Exhibit G, staff PowerPoint presentation. Exhibit H, staff memo dated March 1st, 2023. Exhibit I, all public comments received between January 17th, 2023 and March 21st, 2023. At this time, I'll move to continue the public hearing for the subject zoning text amendment dated February 27th, 2023 to amend portions of Articles 1, 4, 7, 8, 9, 14, and 27, also known as ZC case number 2023-03 until April 20th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. in the Township Hall. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
One note, Exhibit H, staff memo dated March 21st,
Thank you.
2023.
Very good. Roll call?
Roll call, trustee Antonetts.
Yes.
Trustee Goodman.
Yes.
Trustee Vaughn.
Yes, motion carries. All right, so I'll announce that the hearing is closed at 6:37 p.m. Next, we have case number ZC 2022-07, Multi-Sound Studios Zoning Map Amendment, AKA rezoning and preliminary development plan. I'll call to order the hearing at 6:37 p.m. And I'll read the legal notice and ask anyone who wished to speak to this matter to be sworn in. Daniel, I should have asked before. Go ahead. Swear him in now? Oh, okay. Anybody else? You do. Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Is it Bino? Bino. Thank you. So Daniel Bino requesting approval of a rezoning and preliminary development plan to convert and expand an existing residence for commercial use on approximately 1.209 acres at 6463 Maxtown Road, Westerville, Ohio, 43082, PIN 317-341-0500-2000, currently zoned rural residential, seeking rezoning to planned commercial district, PCD, also known as Multi-Sound Studios, ZC case number 2022-07. The legal notice for this meeting was printed and published on March 8th, 2023 in the Delaware Gazette and posted at the Genoa Township Hall on March 3rd, 2023. An attempt to send notice of this meeting to adjacent property owners was also made. The following were marked as Exhibits A through J. Exhibit A, legal notice. Exhibit B, affidavit of advertisement. Exhibit C, sign-in sheet. Exhibit D, application and plans originally received March 7th, 2023. Exhibit E, DCRPC recommendation made November 17th, 2022. Exhibit F, fire marshal letter dated February 15th, 2023. Exhibit G, trustee acknowledgement of the zoning commission's recommendation made on March 2nd, 2023. Exhibit H, staff memo dated March 14th, 2023 for March 21st, 2023. Exhibit I, staff technical review dated March 14th, 2023 for March 21st, 2023. Exhibit J, all public comments received between November 4th, 2022 and March 21st, 2023. So at this time, I'll ask Joe Schaefer to give his staff report.
Thank you, Trustee Vaughn. So as you noted, we're here for a rezoning application on Maxtown Road. Mr. Bino is seeking a rezoning and preliminary development plan approval to convert an existing 2,486 square foot single-family dwelling located on approximately 1.206 acres, which equates out to 1.181 acres post right-of-way dedication at 6463 Maxtown Road into a 3,381 square foot approximately commercial building, as well as to construct an approximately 4,500 square foot addition, technically 4,452 square feet, connected to the existing structure by an approximately 383 square foot covered breezeway. Total enclosed space equals approximately 8,216 square feet. The desired zoning district is plain commercial district. The proposed use is a music rehearsal studio consisting of 10 studio spaces with the potential expansion increasing that figure to 25 individual spaces. This use would fall under the classification of service, business, and office in the zoning resolution. A little bit of history of the site. This parcel is lot 1112 of Griffith Subdivision Number 1, recorded on September 2nd, 1969. It is the easternmost lot of said plat, which also includes the parcel to the west, which is 6391 Maxtown Road, and two parcels further west at 6157 Maxtown Road, which now are formerly Tysinger Excavating, and 6159 Maxtown, which is a public storage formerly known as Cardinal Self Storage. Oddly enough, the three parcels in between, which is 6319 through 6201 Maxtown Road, were not included in the aforementioned plat. The existing home on the property, formerly known as the Downing Residence, was permitted on February 9th, 1976, permit number W670. Staff assumes the detached accessory garage was constructed at the same time, but we can't prove that because we found no record specifically to it. Regarding the surroundings of the property to the immediate east at 6475 Maxtown Road was rezoned to Planned Commercial District on November 18th, 2021 for the yet-to-be-constructed J.C. Manny project. During this hearing, it was noted that the subject property this evening had recently sold and that the applicant for this proposal was considering commercial zoning at some time in the future, which is now. As such, they did not object to J.C. Manny's request. The properties to the immediate north and northeast are zoned Planned Residential District as part of the Northern Point Village, aka Northern Lake Section 1 neighborhood, recorded on October 23rd, 1991. The property located immediately to the northwest at 6450 Ridge Lake Court is zoned rural residential. Though it fronts and accesses Ridge Lake Court from a platting perspective, it is not part of the Northern Lake Section 1 plat. This is because said house existed prior to the surrounding neighborhood being built. Its access previously being provided via driveway shared with a house on one of the parcels that the aforementioned neighborhood was later built on. The driveway was located where Hillmar Drive is now situated. The property immediately to the west at 6391 Maxtown Road was rezoned to Planned Commercial District several years ago and was most recently home to a construction company. All properties to the immediate south across Maxtown Road are within the city of Westerville and consist of industrial uses such as Sonova and a different Cardinal Self-Storage operation. Layout of the proposal is projected here on the screen. The proposal would renovate the existing home, as I noted, into a non-residential structure to accommodate the business. Vertical additions would be constructed on the wings of the home such that the entire building is 2 stories, or 29 feet in height. The middle section of the home already being at 2 stories. The additions would increase the overall size of the building to, again, approximately 3,381 square feet. An area is being reserved to the west-southwest of the existing home for future expansion. The expansion would consist of the approximately 4,500 square foot building already noted, connected to the existing structure by the breezeway I also noted. Regarding the parking lot, a new 7-space parking lot would be constructed on the west end of the site, south of the existing structure, in the reserved expansion area to service the business. An area for parking lot expansion is being reserved should the aforementioned building expansion ever occur. The reserved expansion would increase the size of the parking lot to 17 spaces. A divergence relative to the number of parking spaces provided is being requested. See the divergence review below for more information. And I'll go through that momentarily. A concrete sidewalk connecting the proposed parking lot to the existing building as well as the potential addition would be provided. A ramp up to the entrance of the existing building is also proposed, likely to make it accessible. A dumpster would be placed in the northwest corner of the proposed parking lot. It would be screened by a 5-foot 8-inch Trex composite fence and gate. The proposed impervious coverage of the site is 31.4% for the initial build-out and 56% for the balance. Regarding access and traffic, the driveway will access Maxtown Road directly. Previous designs, including the version voted on by the Zoning Commission, proposed connecting the site to the under construction J.C. Manny property and sharing a driveway. The new engineer for the city of Westerville, however, has since authorized this development to have its own driveway cut, subject to city review and approval of the actual design. Proof of this approval should be submitted with the final development plan application should this request be approved. Genoa Township Fire Marshal has no concerns with the proposed access, and that includes the latest proposal with the direct driveway access to Maxtown. Staff has observed that the driveway appears to overlap a portion of the driveway servicing the property immediately to the west at 6391 Maxtown, and has requested clarification or proof that the city of Westerville has approved this design. I'm assuming that was just an oversight and it can be adjusted. It's not a terribly large overlap, but it does seem to, the flare outs there at the end seem to cross just slightly. Stormwater management would be provided via an above-ground detention basin located at the southeast corner of the site. As this area is not otherwise being developed and is essentially functioning as a designated open space, staff believes it is not subject to the water impoundment restrictions otherwise found in section 1614 of the zoning resolution. Regarding utilities, letters from water, electric, and natural gas companies have been provided. The applicant is proposing to use the existing septic system on site instead of connecting to sanitary sewer. This makes sense as the closest sanitary lines are located on the northern side of Ridge Lake Court and in the northwest portion of 6319 Maxtown Road, which is Harris Automotive, which is 2 parcels to the west. Proof that this arrangement is acceptable to the Delaware Public Health District should be provided. The zoning code does not require commercially zoned properties to be connected to sanitary sewer. The recently approved J.C. Manny project will also likely utilize a new septic system. The stormwater basin would drain via a new storm sewer line that will connect to an existing line along Maxtown Road. Regarding landscaping, a 6-foot tall brick wall is being proposed along the northern property line, as well as along the northern end of the eastern and western property lines to screen the development from adjacent properties. The balance of the eastern and western lot lines will contain a 6-foot tall fence, or I'm sorry, I believe that was 5 foot 8 inches, to provide additional screening to neighboring properties. The applicant will need to revise the plan so that the fence is not located within 20 feet of the proposed Maxtown Road right-of-way. The majority of the existing trees on the site will be retained. However, a total count cannot be provided as the landscape drawing in the current submission had not been updated to reflect the new driveway configuration. And then I struck out, not in your copy, but I've since struck out the balance of the text in that section because I'll have to reanalyze all of that in regards to tree disturbance counts and sizes once we see that updated landscaping plan. No new plantings have been provided, excuse me. 3 light fixtures are proposed for the site, one in the northeast corner of the parking lot, one in the southeast corner of the parking lot, and one along the western side of the proposed driveway. Specifics regarding lighting, such as fixture design, photometrics, etc., can be deferred until the final development plan application, should the applicant wish to do so. However, this should be made clear in the materials instead of stating that the site is compliant. And we've basically talked about this through the zoning, and that understanding is clear. The applicant will also need to make it clear what their intentions will be regarding any building-mounted lighting, existing or proposed. And again, they sort of know that can be a final detail. The current application does not include any materials pertaining to signage, even though the development text response to Article 18 states the site is compliant. The applicant has opted to defer proposing signage, if any is desired, until the final development plan application. This is acceptable to staff. Just with the understanding that, ideally whatever they're proposing, if they did propose signage, would be compliant. Otherwise, they would have to ask for additional divergences with the final plan. Speaking of divergences, let's go through the ones that are being requested this evening for this application. First, a divergence from section 1203.01, which requires only parcels 5 acres in size or adjacent to other parcels zoned planned commercial district or under application for rezoning to planned commercial district that collectively sum 5 acres or more shall be considered for planned commercial zoning. That is being requested. The applicant is requesting to rezone a 1.206 acre parcel, which again equates out to 1.181 acres post right-of-way dedication, that is not surrounded by existing PCD lots totaling 5 acres. Staff note, though the parcel is located immediately to the east and west are zone PCD, they do not total 5 acres. They are 0.828 and 1.88 acres respectively, which only comes up to about 2.7 acres total. Paul, I'm going to ask you to bring up drawing A-INF for this next comment here. That's the one. And any chance you could try to zoom a little bit, not too much, yeah, into those drawings there. So I asked Paul to do that because these drawings speak to these next couple divergences. So next couple divergences I'm going to go through are rather lengthy and a little bit difficult to understand when someone reads them to you, but when you see the drawing, it makes a lot more sense. But I'm going to read through it, but then we can look at the drawing. So a divergence from section 1203.03 A and B, which requires that along lot lines shared with a residential or planned residential district, a 75-foot undeveloped green strip planted with grass and/or landscape with the purpose of providing a year-round combination of shrubs and trees be provided, as well as a visual and mechanical barrier in accordance with section 2003, 75 or more feet from said lot lines is also being requested. The applicant is proposing, one, a rear, AKA north green space setback of 63 feet. Two, a side, AKA west green space setback of 6 feet. Three, a side, AKA east green space setback of 6 feet, which is 75 feet from the adjacent residential parcels. Or, I'm sorry, green space setbacks of 6 feet. The front, AKA south, green space setback of 25 feet is being proposed. And five, a boundary around the existing house exempt from setback requirements to allow for future site improvements for items such as sidewalks, ramps, as follows. 10 feet from the southernmost extent of the existing roof, 5 feet from the extent of the existing roof on either side of the house, and 5 feet from the rear edge of the existing deck. And finally, sub-item number 6 to this request, they're requesting to reduce, i.e. waive the requirement for the visual and mechanical barrier at 75 or more feet from the lot lines to 0 feet, consisting of a 6-foot brick wall along property lines shared with the residential uses and again, I believe that's 5 feet, 8 inches, wooden fence along the property line shared with the commercial uses. So the drawing up here, you can see basically what they did, and we'll also get into this with the next divergence, is this is the setback plan, or the plan with all the setbacks drawn on it if they were to apply them as written in the code. So all of that white area here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to take the microphone with me and just get up because it's easier. All of this white area shown on the drawing would be all area that they could not build in or do anything in because of the setbacks. Same with this area, white area down here. This dark shaded gray area is the buildable area for this site if all of those setbacks were applied, which you can see isn't a lot. You can also see the house and the existing accessory structure are already within those setback areas. And then if you go to the bottom drawing, Paul, if you can scroll down actually, the next divergence I'm going to go through speaks to this. This is what they're proposing. Again, this is the same sort of drawing where the white area represents the areas where they still would be honoring the setbacks, exclusive of the existing structures that are already there. And then the dark gray area is what they're asking their buildable area to be. So you can see there was sort of an increase in buildable area here. Sort of, I guess that would be sort of the northwestern area. And then also this sort of this strip here, this buffer used to come down further if you were to look at the other drawing, but they're asking to expand that a little bit. So I'm going to read through that in text form, but again, it's actually much easier to visualize. So divergence number 3 is the divergence from section 1208.01, which requires that front, side, and rear yards be designed so that no building is closer than 50 feet to any other building, and that no building shall be closer than 100 feet to any district boundary line or street right-of-way. The applicant is proposing to waive the 50-foot separation requirement as well as the 100-foot requirement, noting that the existing house and accessory storage shed are within the 100-foot setback, as well as establishing the following setbacks. 1, a rear, aka north building setback equal to 78 feet 3 inches, with the line of measurement being established by the extent of the existing roof. 2, a side, aka west building setback equal to 8 feet from the adjacent PCD property. 3, a side, aka east building setback equal to 85 feet from the adjacent residential parcels, the line being established by the west face of the existing garage, 8 feet from the adjacent PCD property. And 4, a front, aka south building setback equal to 100 feet from the property line. Staff note, again, while the setbacks are complex when read in text form, they are much clearer and easier to understand when reviewing the drawing that I just went over. And then there's one other divergence, so this would be the 4th divergence being requested, and that is a divergence from section 1904.18, which requires a parking ratio of 1 space for every 200 feet of floor area. The applicant is proposing to reduce the required ratio to 1 space for every 500 square feet of floor area. That concludes the divergence review. Moving on to staff comments. The 2019 comprehensive plan recommends planned commercial utilization of this property in Chapter 4, Planning Area 6, as well as on the comprehensive plan map, with, quote, significant visual screening and noise barriers for the single-family homes to the north, end quote. This specific recommendation dates back to the 2008 comprehensive plan. A comparable recommendation exists in the 1999 comprehensive plan, which noted that the properties on Maxtown Road will develop in a manner similar to the existing commercial and industrial development within this vicinity, and states, quote, further encroachment of residential development into this area should be discouraged, end quote. Delaware County Regional Planning Commission comments. On November 17th, 2022, Regional Planning recommended conditional approval of the subject application, the conditions being, 1, if signage is proposed, a sign plan should be included in the submission. We've already discussed that. 2, the applicant should clarify whether a fence, including material or brick wall, is proposed along the perimeter of the site. They've since addressed that. And 3, identify the shared access easement for the parcel directly east on the plan. Again, that's no longer a valid issue because they've revised the driveway. Regional planning staff was generally supportive of the requested divergences, noting, 1, this is a low-intensity use and the proposed screening and buffering appear to be acceptable. However, the township should determine if the existing trees are an appropriate visual barrier or if additional landscaping is needed along the northern property border. And 2, the shed and home are existing buildings and no major renovations are proposed that will bring them closer to the northern property line. That ended regional planning's review. The Genoa Township Zoning Commission recommended approval 5-0 of the subject application on February 15th, 2023, noting that divergence request number 2 should be reworded as it pertains to the visual and mechanical barrier for the sake of clarity. The applicant has since revised the materials accordingly. I'll get to staff's technical review in a moment. A few other notes here that I had are that most of the proposed site improvements would occur south of the existing home closer to Maxtown Road, thereby minimizing any impact on the existing residents to the north of the site. Most site lighting, as well as the dumpster, have been placed in the southwest portion of the site adjacent to the property that is already zoned and used for commercial purposes. The same goes for the proposed stormwater pond in the southeast corner of the site. Staff assumes that the nature of the business requires no sound from outside the building, let alone inside the building, be heard. As such, it seems reasonable to assume that measures that will be taken to prevent this from occurring will similarly keep noise from within the building from being heard outside. Also, any revisions which may be required by engineering reviews conducted by Delaware County and/or Westerville can be addressed as part of the required final development plan submission. Staff is not aware of any such revisions at this time other than just the change to the driveway access that I've already noted. Should the application be approved, it shall only constitute approval of the rezoning request and preliminary development plan. Final development plan approval pursuant to Article 27 of the resolution will have to be obtained from the township prior to construction. Such approval would also be subject to the provisions of Section 2704.18 through 2704.23 of the zoning resolution. How the potential future addition and associated parking lot expansion are approved will depend on how the applicant wishes for the project to proceed. If they do not believe that these items will be constructed within 3 years of obtaining final approval for the initial phase of the project, staff recommends it not be included in the said application, though keeping the area land banked, and instead apply for final approval of said items via the township's development plan amendment process when or if the time comes for them to be built. Moving to the technical review, I'm not going to go through a lot of this. Most of the comments they've addressed, a lot of the comments you see that are still open are just sort of informational comments. I will just draw your attention to development review comments number 22 and 23. Again, regarding the driveway access and the desire to see approval from Westerville at some point, should we move on to final? And comment 23 was revising the landscape drawing to reflect the new driveway configuration. So I know I went through a lot. I may have misread a thing here or there, so that's why we have the applicant here this evening to give their presentation and clear up any thing I may have gotten wrong and also answer any questions that the board or public may have. So with that, Madam Chairwoman, I turn it back over to you.
Perfect, thank you. This time I'll turn it over to the applicant if you want to come up to the table and give you a presentation. Yes. And if you could turn your microphones on, they're not on currently. Thank you. And if you could state your name for the record.
Daniel Bino.
Okay,
And I'm Jason McGee.
very good. Thank you. Floor is yours.
All right, I'll start out and just say, in rewriting and asking for these divergences, since we've started this project, we've just tried to make every attempt at staying true to respecting, the setbacks as they're written in the zoning code, and we've tried to be very selective about asking for that buildable area, reserving some of the area around the house for reasonable accommodations, for site improvement, for sidewalks, for circulation, for things like that. But we've tried to be very minimal at how we touch the site and preserve, the nature of the existing house, and also be very mindful of the residential neighbors, particularly to the south and, the north and northeast of the site. Any comments you want to make, Dan?
Not really. Mr. McGill here, we've been working with his, KDG's firm for almost a year now, and Mr. McGee has always been very resourceful and very accessible to all my questions, and I think that he had so far a great dialogue with your crew in relation to all the things that were brought upon and any questions there were to him in relation to our business. And we're very grateful to have him.
I guess the only other thing I would add is that some of the outstanding items like signage, site lighting calculations, things like that, we've started to assemble an engineering team in the office, and so those people we brought on, and we'll address those things in the final steps, as we pursue the final site development plan.
Trustee Antonins, do you need to make a comment?
Yes. So, for the sake of transparency and to avoid any conflict of interest, I'm, for the record, want to advise you that our firm and KDG do work together currently and for a good period of time. Also, I consulted with the prosecuting attorney, Mark Fowler, advised him of the situation, and consulted with Mr. Fowler about my ability to participate in the discussion, deliberation, and voting on this issue, and he confirmed, as long as we aren't directly and intimately involved in this project and will not be in any future manner, that there is no conflict of interest.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I didn't want to cut you off, but I also didn't want to forget. So is there anything else that you want to?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Are there any questions, specifically
Yeah,
for us?
I'll open it up to trustee
Yeah,
comments.
please.
Do you want to do public comments? Oh, yes, thank you. We're just going to skip right back over that. Yeah, is there anybody in the public who wants to speak? I don't believe you were
About this issue.
sworn in.
And about this issue.
Yeah, it has to be regarding this issue. It is. Okay, all right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. All right, come on up and we'll hear your public comment.
Good evening. My name's Rick Whelan. I'm at 9500 Britton Woods Drive. I have one question to ask right off the bat here, and that's as far as the size of the building. Looks like you're trying to remodel that existing house, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you guys have measurements on that drawing as far as what the finished height of that building is going to be?
Yeah, Paul, can you go to the scroll to the last page on the drawing? Yeah, there you go. I think that may be the last one. So the existing house is on top. You can see the center portion where the entry's at, and the two sides of the house above the garage and the dining room are single-story height, and we're raising both sides of the house to be 2 stories. The height of that, it's fuzzy on the screen.
24.
Yeah, 24.
Or
Yeah, there you go.
124 feet 4 inches, is that right? Or is that your, that's
Yeah,
your
so
elevation
it's-
heights or whatever?
It's approximately 26 feet from grade to the roof height.
From grade or from finished floor? That's not from grade.
From grades at 98.6 on this drawing, and then up to 24.4 is where the
So
roof
you're
height-
about
the roof
26
height-
feet, 2 inches, is that right?
Yeah, roughly.
Well, let's get some exact measurements on stuff if we can for these things. Because what's happened in the past is we're getting drawings submitted and stuff, and we're not getting the proper information and stuff on them as far as stuff goes. And it has to be an elevation from the grade point to the highest part of that roof, okay?
Sure.
Do you have a pitch on your roof up there that you have then, as far as what you have? Does it say it on your, is that 612 or?
Looks like I'm not indicating it on this drawing, and I don't recall what it is right offhand.
Okay.
That's not a zoning requirement anyway,
No, at this
No, it
stage,
just
we're
determines the
looking for-
height of the building or whatever, but as long as they've got their stuff on there. But see, that's why it's confusing, and for you guys, just for your knowledge and stuff too, when they put a height up there, and, you know, they're putting, they're not putting actual building heights on there, they're putting elevation heights for you guys to determine. And I don't know if all of you guys are engineers and know how to read that stuff,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure Mark
finished-
does.
Finished floor is 100, the rooftop is 124.4, so that's 24 feet, and the code's 35, so they're well under code, right?
But you didn't count in grade there, Mark, on your
Well,
total.
then it's another 2 feet, you're still
Exactly.
well below 35.
Exactly, I'm just want to explain it to the other members and stuff too, or whatever, so that they're aware of that type of business and
Well
stuff.
aware of it, sat on zoning for many years,
All
and
righty.
understand it.
Very good, okay. All righty, well, that was my main question on this. The only other question I had was some of the stuff on, as far as sound-wise that you had for the residents in the back on the east side.
Yeah, I think there's your address sound on your.
I believe,
Is that going to mean that if they stand in their backyard, they're not going to hear any sound from this area?
all
or-
inside. This is all
Actually,
inside.
the emphasis in our business, I've been at the helm for 20 years, well, north of 20 years. Multi-Sound has been founded in 1978. We're established in New York City, in Queens, a little suburb called Whitestone, north of Queens. It's a residential neighborhood. It's the same situation that we're mimicking. And I can tell you that our emphasis of the business is sound reinforcement, is making sure that sound does not leak. We're not even talking about sound leaking outside. It shouldn't leak from one room to the next.
Really?
Because if one band is practicing while another, and there is leakage, we won't be around for 44 years.
Kind of concerned with an existing
course.
house like that, all the stuff you have to do to an I can see doing that as a new construction type of a thing, but it seems like there's a lot of extra work you're going to have to do soundproofing wise for an
Major.
existing
Absolutely.
residence, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah, the emphasis on insulation and capturing and preserving sound internally is the forte of our business, I can tell you. It's mainly construction. My wife and I do not dabble in music or production or recording. We're just facilitating for musicians and making sure that they're, just as you're concerned for sound isolation is needed, so is theirs, because that's their bread and butter.
Yeah,
So-
they want to keep everything in on
Of
their
course.
recordings.
So the emphasis is not to get sound from traveling imagine from one room to the next, let alone 70, what's the setback, 75 feet?
No, not on the side yard, it's not.
Yeah, no.
See what I'm saying? It's only,
Oh,
I don't
no,
even know
it's-
what
It's not
your
gonna
side-
leave, it's not gonna leave the building. It's not gonna leave the room.
Right. What if it does? Does the township have any recourse on that stuff or whatever? I mean, are you guaranteeing that if I stand in the neighbor's yard there, I wouldn't hear any sound from that
Sure,
building? right?
absolutely.
That's nice. I'm glad to hear
Yeah,
it. It's on the right side.
we're knocking down the windows, it's not gonna be any windows, there's not gonna be central AC, because that also contributes to sound traveling outside.
Yeah.
And again, all these things, we're very blessed with having a business that's facilitating for catering for our musicians and the surrounding neighbors as well. As you can imagine, in Queens, it's a little bit more condensed than over here.
Right, yeah.
And the
Well,
guys
just-
next door to are literally 5 feet away from us. And there's
Yeah,
never a
just a
problem.
concern with a residential building that you're trying to convert it into that type of
Sure.
structure.
I can tell you that the only thing that we will do is, in addition to that, is expand the doors getting into the building. We will have 2 doors getting in, so that in case one schmuck is gonna leave the door open on the inside, pardon French, it's an old phrase in Hebrew, that the front door is gonna be closed, shut
Okay.
still. So it's we have quite the experience with sound traveling
So you'll have studios on that east side pretty much too, or whatever, versus whatever?
internally. It's all
Internally,
internal.
right.
Nothing, yeah, there's not going to be any,
Is that on first floor and second floor that you do that?
Yes.
stuff? Okay. All right.
there's not going to be any events happening outdoors or indoors. It's not a club. That's the one thing that we always tell our clients, by the way. It's not a clubhouse. It's a professional place for music recording and rehearsal, and we are in the business of keeping it professional and not turning it to an abomination of of sort.
Noted. All right, very good. Thank you very
Sure,
much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't think there's anybody else, but just to be sure. All right, I'll close public comment and move on to trustee comments. I don't know anybody.
So I think we've addressed lighting and signage, right? You're just going to submit code compliant, verify photometrics and signage meets, and you're prepared to review and. So I think you're okay, but in your general project information, proposed impervious area, you're using the existing square footage of the structure and not the additional square footage. So your impervious area is not going to be 31.4%. It's going to be 8,216 plus the 10,232. You're still going to be well below the 75%. But, just make note of that. So let's go back to this future access, and I'm saying this because I have experience with your neighbor on this whole access.
You too?
Yeah. So I see you have verbal approval from the city of Westerville, which is great, but I don't know how much merit you want to put in the verbal. So you're showing this drive of yours being that close to the neighbor's drive. I would caution you that a verbal from the city of Westerville is not written in stone. Your neighbor's permit was contingent upon sharing access with you. So I don't know that it's an issue regarding approval of this. I'm just cautioning you that this may change based on your actual.
Want me to speak to the
Please,
background of that?
please.
I can. I just don't want to interrupt.
Nope.
So what happened is we took this site plan to the city of Westerville, I think it was in November. Right after I submitted the first set of preliminary plan drawings, and we met with city of Westerville, and they told us about the access drive with next door. So the fire marshal had already approved this plan, and then we found out that we need to tie into the neighbors. So we've started pursuing that route. Dan was working with his lawyer and the lawyers and the neighbor next door. And then right after we met with the zoning committee in the last meeting, like the very next day again, Westerville came back and said that they would grant us our own access drive rather than tying into the neighbor's drive next door. So the next step for us is to then go back to Westerville and present to them, final.
Yeah, final drawing.
Right, so we know we're like a step or two away, but that's kind of how this has unfolded and why it seems kind of herky-jerky. But I feel like at every step of the way, I think we've been going with the flow pretty well and just trying to appease Westerville with the other drive, and so it's,
Right.
yeah. I guess that's how the drama unfolded for.
No, I hope it works out for you, because I don't think your
Right.
neighbor was really enthused about the prospect.
Right. I'm trying, Mr.
Antoinette.
Antoinette, thank you. I'm trying to just relate to, you were saying that you think that what Westerville has approved as of now is not set in stone, or what they approved back then wasn't set in stone? Because clearly what they approved back then wasn't set in stone.
Well, they won't, you're not gonna get an approval till, like Jason said, you're gonna submit your full final construction drawings to the city.
Sure,
And
of
then
course.
they'll approve it.
Absolutely.
But a verbal is a good start. I just caution you, a verbal is not a commitment.
Sure, no, we're well aware.
I'm
of
only
course.
saying
Thank you.
this because I don't want it to impact this zoning, so you have to come back with an amended, because have to change your landscaping, now you're gonna have pavement across the front instead of an access drive. So I'm just cautioning you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right?
And again, just to relate to that, what you mentioned is exactly what happened. There was a dispute between her and having a shared driver, which led to this. My wife and I we're the new guys in town, and our main objective is to just make sure that we do things to make sure that Genoa and the city of Westerville are both satisfied with, and that we adhere to what they're requesting of us, and it's all we did up until she had an opposition to have a shared driver, which is why this was changed. In no shape, way, or form, we were trying to get out of a shared driveway, and that's the reason why this issue came to be. So hopefully they will stick to what they resolve now, so we don't have to go through this again, because we love to see you guys, but I mean, like, I'm sure your time is valuable.
I mean, frankly, if you do not have a written agreement, they can't deny you access. It may not look like that because you're so close to the neighbor, but they cannot deny you access to the road because you don't have an option.
Right.
If you had a written agreement with the neighbor, then maybe they could enforce that. But I think you're fine. It just may not look like that when you're
Right.
CD level.
And it's, sure. Yep.
I think that's all I had, Joe. I do want to do the zoning question of, what if it sells, what protects the future use from becoming a compliant use in this?
Sure, so if the business would go away, move, whatever, any use that's permitted in the planned commercial district would be authorized to go into that space. So retail, office, and that list can change, obviously. We have the ability to amend the code and to dictate what those uses would be. Unless there was a specific binding provision approved as part of the final development plan that said this site, and that would be something the applicant would really have to put forward, was we agree as part of this final development plan that this site will not be used for X, Y, and Z uses. They could offer that if there was any kind of concern. Historically, we haven't done that, though. We've always been pretty confident in our zoning, and again, with this being a commercial zoning district and both sites on either side being in the exact same boat in terms of use change over. But yeah, that's a good question, one we often get from the public when those issues come up.
So this is good. I mean, obviously, the neighbors have expressed their concerns, and you've addressed them. Otherwise, I assume they would be here, so that's always good. Are there any outstanding issues that I haven't seen any documentation in here of neighbors that specifically spell out a concern, so I assume all the neighbors are...
No, unlike the J.C. Manning hearing, I don't know if we got a single public comment on this one. We had some attendees at the zoning commission level meetings. I can't say that no one spoke, but it wasn't to the level of concern that we saw with J.C. Manning. And obviously, it doesn't sound like any of the immediate neighbors are here this evening regarding this matter. So just to tie back to the driveway issue real quick, one of the things staff would hope is that that issue get locked up with the city. Should this application be approved, that the applicant then go to the city, get that all locked down, because when they come back they will have to come back for round 2 of this, for the final development plan. And that way, if there was a change and they did have to connect into Manny, they could reflect that in the final development plan. It wouldn't impact the rezoning per se, but it obviously would impact the development plan.
Including your landscaping, because your landscaping plan shows the connection.
I realized that once I fired off the final plots.
That's all I have, Jim.
Well, Trustee Antonette's already did my driveway notes, so we don't have to go through that one. In Mr. Schaefer's memorandum, there is a note that proof of the arrangement about the septic system must be provided from the Delaware Public Health District. So again, I would encourage you to get that in writing. Verbal is nice, but writing is a lot easier to prove. So, definitely get that if you can. Otherwise, that will be a huge issue trying to figure out what you're going to do next, because you got to do something there, okay? Within your text, I had a couple questions. On page 4, you referenced this as an historical structure. My understanding that this is an existing structure, but it has no historical merit at all. It's not like from the Civil War or something like that. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that I wasn't missing something, because if I was, then altering that building would have all different kinds of ramifications. Okay. Let's see. Give me 1 minute here to get back. Yeah, the setback kinds of things, that's hard to work with because it's an existing structure. And so unless you tear it down and do something new, you're kind of limited with that. My main concern is the parking. And if I did my math right, you're looking at 7 parking spaces, and you would have had 17 under the zoning regulations resolution. That's a substantial change, and my concern is, I don't know your business, but if a number of people show up at the same time, they bring multiple vehicles, will 7 spaces be enough? And what I don't want to see is encroachment of parking, people going into other lots without permission, going over to side streets and cutting through yards or walking all around, creating a nuisance. So that's a concern to me. Is 7 enough?
So the way that we looked at it when we asked for the variance, Mr. Bino looked at the attendance, the usage of his studio in New York, and he determined that approximately 20% of his rooms are used at any given time, or in use, at one point. So what we did is we took the, we're proposing 10 studio spaces in the existing house, and took 20% of that. So then we would anticipate 2 of the rooms being used. So then we're estimating, those 7 spaces would be enough for 2 rooms to be occupied if multiple musicians are attending those rooms at any given time. And then what Mr. Schaefer said is that if we're showing additional parking in the preliminary development plan, like we have it allocated as space for, to cover the future expansion. So a new building with room for new parking is kind of what we're showing. But what Mr. Schaefer has said is if we're showing this, even if we don't build the new building, we could still pull a permit to construct, to enlarge the parking lot if 7 is not enough parking spaces for the site.
And you would be willing to do that should you find there's a deficiency in parking?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
If I can just relate to that, also to expand on the parking, and again, the really nice thing or easy thing for us with doing this now is the experience that we have with the business for, at least for me, for over 20 years. And the way to look at it, the business mimics more like storage space for musicians than it is a rehearsal space. Sure, people do rehearse and record there, but predominantly they will set up their studios. They'll go and they'll jam over there maybe twice, maybe 3 times a week for 2 hours or 3 hour per session. And I can count in one hand how many times I've seen one floor out of the 6 that we have there that was the one floor that was occupied at one time. Mm-hmm. It never happens. If it gets, somehow it gets, the hopefully the business will pick up over here, so much so, that will be like the least of our concern, but it will be a concern nonetheless. But we don't foresee that happening over here, especially with, thinking that over there, we have 50 units that are active at any given time, that could be active at any given time, but they're far from it. You can literally go and hear a needle drop, and again, relating to the sound, the noise issue, you could hear a needle drop in the hallways over there. It's mostly quiet. Usually, like I said, the business is facilitating for musicians to set up their studios, record there, rehearse, but the likelihood that they'll all be busy, even as Jason said, it's a pretty reasonable number. 20% of the time is very rare.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I would like to piggyback on the parking. I have the same concerns as Trustee Goodman with the amount of spaces. It's good to know that if you etch in extra spaces, you can go ahead and pull a permit to build more, and you don't have to go through this process. I would like to see you etch in a few more in case you need them, because those that you've etched in are dedicated to the addition, should you put one on. So I'm concerned you're not going to have enough to begin with the first structure, and then if you tap into the ones that are dedicated for the second structure, then you're going to be in the same boat eventually. So I would like to see more etched in there, just in case. You don't need them, you don't need them. But I'd rather you put them in now, rather than, oh my goodness, you ran out of parking, and now you got to come back to us and ask for, an adjustment. And you got to get permission to add more parking spaces. I'd feel more comfortable with that, especially when I look next door, J.C. Manny. I know based on their application process, they don't have a whole lot of customers at once either. People are in and out of there, but they have more parking dedicated than you do. And I know they have staff, but they have very little staff from what I remember. So just looking at their similar business, they probably have, again, not a ton of people coming in and out of there at once, but they have more parking.
Right.
I just think,
Right,
I think that makes good sense. As I was drawing this out, while we were in the process of figuring out the variance, I sort of wanted to do that, and I thought we have plenty of space to expand. And I think, well, we have space to expand if we need to, but I also didn't want to muddy the water if we're asking for 7 spaces, and then the commission sees, well, there's plenty of spaces here, why ask for variance at all, or why such a severe variance? So I didn't want to muddy that or like have that be a concern, but I think what would make sense then would be to show room for more parking and note additional overflow parking as necessary, and I think that
covers you, that covers us. I think that just, especially, I get that you've been in here for a while, you understand how many parking spaces you need. Queens is a little different than here. I'm sure you don't need as many parking spaces in Queens because people don't drive like they do here. Here, people are going to drive here. We don't have a bus service, as far as I know, that goes here, so.
parking is a high commodity in Queens, high commodity. I would probably be able to rent parking spaces if I
You
had
probably
them in New York. But relating to I guess, sure, that area is going to be designated for parking anyway. We slice it because we don't foresee in building anything there. If anything, we're just thinking of just beautifying the green space that we have there. If we have to pour concrete on it, it'll be a little more, less nicer, but if that's a requirement, we'll do that. I was
Well,
just
this would just kind of set that aside if you need it in the future.
And I like the fact that you want to preserve green space. I'm all about green space, so I don't want to blacktop it if you don't have to. So I'm on your team, I just don't want it to go through this process for
Absolutely.
2 spots, or, whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, that area will be reserved for parking in the future. Hopefully, we'll be successful in our venture here and expand. And if there's a way maybe to track it with you guys so you can actually see what kind of engagement we have with parking over there. There'll be also, you know, good for you to see as well. But I'm all for it, absolutely. I'm all for reserving this for parking, as you said, no problem at all.
You have a comment?
Yeah, and I don't, I'm concerned with that either, just some things to think about if that's the route they decide to go, is we would still have to account for that area if it were to be built out as pavement, even if it's just sort of land banked. If they're saying it could eventually be parking from a zoning enforcement standpoint, to Trustee Anton, it's gave the calculations, and those calculations would have to be amended, so they'd have to make sure they're still falling within the code permitted maximum. Otherwise, that could be a divergence, which would bring them back here. The same with the front yard setback requirements, you know. It sounds like the board's more interested in having the parking as opposed to maybe honoring the setback requirement in that sort of limited area of frontage. They may just have to revise the divergence request pertinent to that. If we are talking about changing the number of parking spaces we're reserving, I'd prefer that we do that at this stage because they are asking for a divergence, so we would like to know exactly what that, if it's still going to be a divergence, and maybe just not quite as severe of a divergence, though. Ideally, we would know that at this stage, too, so we don't have to go back and try to amend things later. So just some food for thought that there could be some changes to the divergences that would be necessary, or possibly even a new divergence, and as also Trustee Antonette's noted, the landscaping design on the final, that would just have to be sort of taken into account. I don't think it's impossible to do by any stretch of the imagination. It clearly looks like you have room for at least, I guess, 7 spaces if divergences weren't a concern, at least. So, I just say that for the edification of everyone in the room, especially the applicant, because it sounds like for wanting them to make a change, you might not be able to vote on it this evening, if that's something you want to see as part of the rezoning. Otherwise, if you don't want them to come back and just want them to take another look at that at final, you're going to have to prove the divergence as is, and then they technically have the divergence, and they could come back and be like, yeah, we looked at it at final, but we decided not to do it, and you already granted us our divergence, so we're vested and have a right to that divergence. So you just got to be careful there. This is one of those issues you probably can't kick to. The parking count is probably not something you can kick to final. That's something, because they're asking for relief to the code, we're going to have to deal with it here.
I don't see the parking in these divergences. Am I missing something?
It's number 4 on page 4.
It should be in there.
I think
But did that make sense, sort of what I was laying out there?
So you're saying if we approve it as is, and then they come back at final and say, yeah, we're not gonna,
They could have an argument that you've already granted the
Yeah.
divergence at that point.
I'm not comfortable with that.
I didn't think so.
I'm not either, because the parking is my main concern.
Same.
I mean, I just, what happens is if you don't have enough parking, people go in the lots next door, that owner gets mad, they
You're
go on
gonna-
the streets, the residents get mad, they call Joe, when Joe can't do anything, they call us, and then, you know, it isn't a good relationship. So I'd like us to take care of that early on, even if it means continuing. You know, if you request a continuance and we have to come back one more time, I'd rather get it right than have problems in the future.
Oh, yeah, no.
That's my opinion.
I agree. I really thought, you know, this wasn't gonna be this big of a deal, but it sounds like it is.
I mean, frankly, this use is an anomaly in our zoning. Probably 90% of the zoning codes don't have this particular use. So that's the struggle we have. We have to find somewhere to put it, and it's kind of it's a gray area. So we have to rely on you. I'm sure you don't want parking problems because it
Yeah.
can affect your business.
No, absolutely. The only thing that, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
The other thing is you have in your development text that you will not be using commercial dumpster, and you have a dumpster on here. So you could probably gain one more spot. You do show a dumpster, but your development text says you will not be using. You remember seeing that? I just saw it. I turned away from it.
I thought it said that they were,
It's
Going to
the
use-
second to last paragraph on page 1, says, "No 18-wheel deliveries or commercial dumpsters are necessary for their operation." And when I saw that I'm a civil engineer. I thought that dumpster's gonna be hard to get in and out of. But if you don't need one, you're gonna get a gain of spot by removing it. But you need to make sure that that's how your operation works, that you're not gonna have a dumpster.
In New York, we have 50 rooms, we have a 3-yarder, we have to have a dumpster with 50 units. With 10 units for the first phase, and again, that's why I wanted just to get the point across. And it relates to both questions. Stage 1 is building the first building. In stage 2, hopefully the business will pick up and be successful for us, that we will opt to get the second building, in which case we'll learn even more about how this picks up in Westerville as opposed to New York. With the projected 10 rooms that we're opting for first phase, I don't expect there to be a dumpster unless it's a requirement. But again, we're just going by what the rules are. I can't imagine with 10 rooms we will need a dumpster, a commercial, yeah. And again, just to, not to beat that old horse to death, or whatever the saying is, my concern with the parking is only one, that based on what we get approved for phase 1, which is the 10 rooms, we will be on the hook for the bigger construction, which will be an additional 15 rooms in the future, by the same count that we have for the 10 rooms, if that makes sense. And at that point, we will be called for a meeting and say, well, you approved for whatever amount of parking spaces you have for 10 rooms, so by that count, now you have to have 25 parking. I think that it's, like you said, the main concern of mine, regardless of what the rules are, is what you just said, that there will be parking issues. I do not want that to happen, just like I do not want anything to happen. And I just want to make sure that in the case that we get approved or not get approved for the divergence, that there will be monitoring and people can actually see that the parking indeed, if it ends up being the same situation like New York, is not being in use just because the occupancy is very, very low. So, you know, what you were just saying is true, and also, you know, it has to make sense for everybody. I don't want to build, you know, I'm sure that nobody else would want to do that. Build empty space for things that are just not being used.
Mm-hmm. One of the things by adding those additional spaces at this point, though, is you'll have the original structure and those additional spaces. We'll be able to get a track record of how full those spaces are. So should you come back in the future and want to expand, we'll know, are all of those spaces being utilized? Are, you know, half of them, a third of them? And we'll have some understanding of what your business is.
Sure.
And how many spaces would be needed with an expansion. It may be the exact same thing, because we're overestimating as opposed to underestimating.
Right.
So just so I'm clear, and I think I am, but the variance request for the parking, you're agreeable to the number that we're showing, 20%. So the number of spaces that we're proposing, it seems like you're agreeable to that calculation, and then it goes into like the code, right? And then, but what you're saying, the insurance spaces would be there, but it doesn't then change the parking calculation or the number that we're requesting for the variance, correct?
Joe's the guy who can answer
The way
that.
I'm looking at it is, let's just assume that you're only going to build phase 1, because we know that if this gets approved and you submit a final, you're at least going to submit final for phase 1.
Correct.
So let's use that as a starting point. You would still need a divergence for that, because the number of parking spaces you're providing that for phase 1 falls below the threshold that the code would require. If I'm understanding correctly, the board is okay with that as long as you would provide the hatch spaces plus maybe some additional hatch spaces for the phase 2 parking, with the understanding that should it ever become apparently a problem that there's parking on site, you could go ahead and pull a zoning permit to construct, as long as it appears on your final development plan, all of these spaces without having to build this.
Got it.
And that's something we could codify as part of this. And I understand Mr. Bino's concern about, he doesn't sort of want to be on the hook of like getting tied into having to build these before he's ready to do that.
No, and we don't want you to build them if you don't need them. But I also want you to have the opportunity to build them.
Without having to
Yeah, but without
Absolutely.
coming back to us.
come back here. And I think that makes sense. So I think we just would have to be careful, it's all about how we word the divergence. So you would have the divergence right to do these 7 spaces with the understanding that a phase 2 addition would increase it to whatever the final number is, 17 currently, possibly more. And maybe with the caveat that you're also reserving the right to separately pull a permit and build these spaces prior to the actual construction of the building. What we would just need to look at is whatever this final total number of all the spaces would be, does that still qualify for a need for a divergence as it relates to the overall site parking? I tend to think it probably does,
Almost positive.
even if because right now you're almost, like 10 spaces under, so even if you added 7 spaces, you're still, what is that, there's gonna be like a net 3 at least shortage. So, that's probably, we might just have to restructure the divergence if we're talking about adding some spaces or sort of changing the approach, just to make sure we cover those bases. At the final plan, also in regards to parking, we can't really do it here with the rezoning, is the fact that, the applicant has the ability to sort of put self-constraints on, generally zoning would look at this and say, your off-street parking area is designated on this plan. You are not allowed to park cars anywhere on this site other than those designated parking spaces. But if the board was still feeling a little, edgy about, well, yeah, but what if they are really full and people start parking in the grass? How are we going to enforce that? At final, that could be a time where you could ask for some sort of, even though it's not a zoning code regulation specifically, say, hey, I'm not really comfortable with this. Would you be willing to put in some sort of restriction that would, bind yourself to say, no, we agree that no one's ever going to be parking on the grass here. We understand that that's not going to be permitted. If that happens, zoning has the authority to come out and issue a zoning violation, and if those violations start coming up, then you would know you've got a choice of either telling people to no longer park on the grass, or we're going to have to build this parking lot to give them a legal place to park. Again, we can't do that at the rezoning because it gets into the contract zoning issue, but it is an option that I at least wanted everyone to be aware of for final. So the applicant always has that ability to sort of build in their own restrictions on themselves to address any concerns the trustees may have. So I and my staff are more than willing, if this would get continued, if we need to sit down with the applicant and help them sort of hash out, okay, this is really what this divergence really needs to crunch out and look like to address sort of what the board's looking for, as well as to making sure it works for the applicant. I can do that. I am leaving for vacation on Friday, but if your only availability is next week, Paul Benson's here. He listens to all these meetings. Him and Susan together.
You're all right with continuing it? I mean, your schedule's going to allow you time to get this.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We have a matter of, we have an inspection in New York on the 29th of April. Or is it 24th? I gotta look at the calendar. With the exception of that 1 week, we can, we're accessible where we
Can we schedule it before then? I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
can schedule whenever you want to
Can
have
I
it.
ask a question
Yeah,
before we do
yeah,
that?
go ahead.
If I'm counting these up correctly, there's 10 spaces that are possible.
Correct.
If those were built out right now, we wouldn't even be talking about a divergence, right? Because we'd be at 17.
Right.
And-
Based on the addition also.
No.
Yeah,
That's
if you
based on-
take
Oh,
the
based
eight-
on the addition
If you
too?
take
Okay.
8,600 divided by 500 square feet, it gives you 16 spots. Meets code, meets your divergence.
Right. But that's with the addition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the alternative avenue is, they could just build them all up front,
That's what we're
and
trying
phase
to
1 wouldn't
avoid.
have an issue.
Over parking, we don't want to
Yeah, that's what
promote
Joe was saying in the
overparking.
beginning, and I think that it's a great idea. Because, and again, my only concern is that the count that we're gonna do right now is gonna put us on the hook for the addition. If it's not even used, then I don't think it's,
Now, we can write the language that the additional parking as the additions develop, or even if it develops.
As needed.
Sure.
I'm not in favor of you building a parking lot that you don't need.
Yeah, I think.
I
we
know,
could-
it's an
Really,
expense,
that's the
and
only
it's
concern.
ruining the character of the land.
I think the divergence could be worded that essentially would say you're reserving the right to build this, but it doesn't necessarily require you to build this. I think is that your concern?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Concern that if you have to come back and build this, that you would also have to build this at the same time?
No.
Okay.
My
Okay, then I must have misunderstood.
Yeah, my concern was only that if I commit to, at this point, to building parking, to pave the road for parking per square feet, where once we implement, and once the business is, hopefully if this gets approved, is lifted, and we see indeed, if we do see, that the parking spots are not being used, then when we go and build the second stage, then the board may come and say, well, you did approve 17 for the first building, now you have to give another 20 based on the count that you have.
Well,
So
and that-
the only thing that I'm trying to do is just make sure that this is commonsensical to everybody.
yeah,
that
it's
we're not on the
commonsensical.
hook just
Yeah.
because it's a regulation, it's just for the use.
We all
Yep.
want the same thing, we
Yep.
just don't do the language.
I think reserving it is definitely, of course, there's no, yeah, we have to have that reserve for parking, because. Well, you have to be in another, come here.
Oh, you have to be sworn in, and you need to come to the microphone.
Come.
Your chair over here.
Yeah, do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so
Super
help you
true.
God?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And your name again for the record?
Nisha Bino.
Okay,
Nice to meet you, but Bino, Miss Bino. So I heard so many things, but trust me on this about the car and the garbage, and talk about the trash. We are in business in New York, and I'm happy so much we moved from there to here because the parking lot, trust me.
yeah,
Trust
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Trust me on that. I'm driving.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. They have so many parking lot over here, park and walk. Oh, yeah, we're happy. The first thing that make us move here. So anyway, go to the point. If something happen with our client, have no parking lot, have not enough space, I will ask my husband to please do immediately. This is emergency. I wish that we have so many. No, please. Normally, they not come up. Sometimes, from our experience, they not come up the same times. Sometimes they storage the equipment. We wish, like he said before, my husband said that we wish that they come the same time. Hardly, we not see any. True. So anyway, the point is, if they need spot parking, we will build it for them. But right now, it just makes sense that make it proof for now, and then we come back to see you guys again and make it more. We fine. We have so many times. We have so much time here. We have nothing but time to make everything beautiful. We love to have green also. We don't like to see also empty parking lot a lot, but no use. Really, I saw so many too
Right.
around here.
Yeah.
That's so.
We're on the same page,
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Yeah,
we're all
so-
there.
Yeah.
So,
Just
a lot of
happy
it's-
to mention that.
A lot of it will
Thank
come
you.
down to, if this were to get approved, once we get the parking issue sort of
Yeah.
wrapped up, just how the finals presented.
Right.
I think that's really the linchpin in this.
Yep.
And if they show it like this at final, what I'm going to say is, if this gets approved like this at final, I'm going to say, well, they have the right to build phase 1 and phase 2. They got approval for both. I may ask at final for a third drawing to just make that abundantly clear that, this left drawing is as is, this drawing is phase 1, and then maybe the third drawing is phase 2 that shows complete build-out. But then we'd also have the verbiage in place that says you're reserving the right to, with phase 2, build the parking lot independent of the building, so you don't feel like the two are tied together. But the understanding though, if you do build the building though, the parking lot does have to happen.
Sure.
So when we write the request for parking, am I being overly wordy by tying the number of parking spaces to the square footage of the building? If I say, we're using this as the this, I forget, 2.4 or whatever the number was, the multiplier, and like I tried to have the exact same number of spaces, and that's kind of how I determine the number. If I say area for future parking, but, if there's 15 more spaces, it's not going to come back and change the calculation, right?
Yeah, so if I understand the question is, so the code says 200 square feet. So you're asking is, do we need to use that formula, or can we just give a parking count number? And
The
that's
code says
divergence.
500 square feet.
500?
Yeah, they're asking to go down to 200.
200.
Yeah.
And you're just saying is, the divergence is, we're not using the formula, we want this number of count and this number of future, and keep it as simple as that.
Yeah. With the assumption that the number of parking spaces, we're covering that 200 square foot formula, but there's more spaces on the site than is necessary based on that formula.
The easiest thing is probably just to break it down into almost a table that says, you know, parking spaces required by code, phase one is X. Proposed is Y for phase one. Required by code for phase one and two together is Y, proposed is this number. It sounds like the latter two numbers might be compliant. If, I didn't check Mr. Antonetti's math, but I trust him. But it sounds like the numbers for phase one is where the non-compliance comes in. We have to assume that there's a chance that you never build the second phase. So that's why you need the divergence for phase one, because if you never build phase two, the site's never going to be compliant. Hence why we're asking for the divergence, because if it's always just this phase one building, it would always technically be under park. I think what I'm hearing the board saying is they're saying they're comfortable with this overall approach, but I think they would like maybe a few more reserved spaces added to this plan. So if it does turn out that there's a parking problem, not only would you be built out to the full 17 for the site, but maybe you actually have a few more to play with as well, in case it does turn out that the parking demand is greater than what was expected. Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, if you're gonna structure it that way, put as many as you can get on there. Take it all the way to the setback.
Yeah, like I said, we have no problem, it's perfectly well said. We have no problem like putting this many I mean, it's gonna be either green or asphalt for us, you know? And like I said, I'd much rather stay green, cut less trees and leave everything as is. If there's, and I don't know if that's why I'm asking, I don't know if there's a way to designate them, the area, or basically any dead space there for parking. But my question is simple. Do I have to start paving the whole? No. At this stage, at this point, I do not. So will I have to pave the 7 spots over there? That seems like a yes. Like regardless of what
Yes.
this.
Yeah, what you have shaded?
Yeah, what I have shaded, that's what we
That's
have
what
to
you're
do.
committing to at this point.
Yeah, so that's great. Everything else, we can designate it, the parking, no problem, of course.
Just again, know that by doing that though, I have to treat that as paved area, and that could impact your setback requirements, your impervious surface coverage. We can't sort of live in that quantum state where it is and it is not parking. If it's gonna be parking, I'm gonna review it, assuming that it's gonna get built and that it will have to also be
Yeah, but it
covered.
won't impact your divergence. You'll still be under the coverage. You're inside the setbacks, so I wouldn't get overly concerned about it.
But it would be a reason to do a continuance so that we can look at all the numbers and make sure that everything, that solving one thing doesn't create another problem.
Right.
So,
Unintended consequences.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something I would look for in the next review, but obviously we don't ideally want to have to continue it again. If I did find something like that, I'd probably try to work with the applicant, and even though we don't usually like 11th hour supplementations to the applications, but if this has already been continued once, I may try to see if they can get you that, any cleanup that they would need in the interest of moving things forward.
That's fine.
I trust Joe, you two work out how the language, he can represent us, and you get what you want, get the language tightened up,
Yeah.
and then we can meet again, and that will be the only item that,
Yeah.
hopefully it's the only item we need to address.
From my perspective, that's the only item that I have a
Right.
concern about is
Same.
the parking. Other than that, I think it's fine. I think it's a wonderful addition to Genoa Township. Nothing we like it around here. But I'm worried about that parking.
Same.
Yeah, and one thing I can add to that last point, if we do get the business lifted successfully, if we get approved, first of all, I think that the whole area will benefit from that as well. Musicians love to eat, they love to go to restaurants, they love to go to local shops in our little neighborhood in Whitestone, which is the same population as Westerville, more or less. I believe it's around like 30, is it 37,000?
Westerville?
Westerville.
I don't
Or
know.
townships,
Between
about 26.
28, okay, got it, 28, yeah, that was the other number. In Whitestone, it's 37, so
Our client go
So
everywhere.
when we-
support all the local
when
business.
when we strategized and looked to expand, that was one of the things that also we wanted to do is keep things as they are, and we're looking for places that are similar geographically, and also all the amenities that are around us. And I think we were very blessed to find the
It's
property,
amazing.
and more blessed to have such a wonderful, really,
Yeah.
Mr. Schaefer is been very attentive to our
the top of
questions, and there've been many,
Very good.
so.
But don't get that wrong, we appreciate to Chief, we appreciate that. That's why it's quality around here, because this office, all you guys, check, make sure everything good, everything safe, everything correct, like that gentleman, you know, he come up
Yep.
to speak. Everybody have to know before we build, we don't want to fix it. We want to protect something is before it happen. That's our women,
Well,
especially.
That's what we have the meeting.
We all too, and verify we are meeting, especially a woman also. Sorry, gentlemen, but true. We don't want to fix things. We want to make sure everything, protect and it happen.
Thank you.
Sure, we appreciate.
I think we'll make a motion to
Yeah.
continue. We
Yeah,
good
we
with
need to
that?
figure out the date.
Oh, okay.
So as you know, the hall's pretty hard to come by free nights.
All right.
Your regular
Give us a
meeting
date.
is, in April is the 6th, which to me seems too soon, especially considering I believe myself and Trustee Vaughn are not going to be in town next week. Your third Thursday of the month meeting that you hold is April 20th, and you've already continued the hearings for those other two items, which are pretty substantive in nature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is this something you'd be, so I guess your option is either trying to A, find another night in April, if we can find one, that's open for all parties plus the hall, or you could also consider putting on your May 4th regular meeting agenda, since this is a pretty
It'll be pretty quick.
specific issue. We've done that before when it's a holdover item and there's only really one thing the board's looking at. We'll sometimes just incorporate it as part of your regular meeting agenda.
Can we, are you saying the week of the 10th is too busy or too soon?
Well, I was just looking at your current scheduled meetings. So your
Oh,
current scheduled
okay.
meetings are April
Okay.
6th, which is, I think, too soon,
Mm-hmm.
just for staff to get it and review it. And also for the board to get it and review it. April 20th is already your hearings for the comp plan and zoning resolution. I assumed you didn't want to have another hearing on that agenda and focus, usually you want to just focus on those
Yeah.
things historically. So then your only other next regular meeting was the May meeting. Again, you could schedule a special meeting earlier than that, but I'd have to check to see, you know, obviously the applicant would need to be available as well as the room and staff.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm okay doing it on the 4th. I don't know, I have no idea what's going to be on our agenda that night, but this.
Kind of a stupid, this shouldn't take long.
Okay, all right. So you're good with that? Okay. Are you okay, May 4th?
May or April? May 4th, yep.
My wife is due May 9th,
Oh, you may not be with them.
Oh, boy.
but my drawings will be done before that night, so.
So worst comes to worst, you'll be fine?
You can do it virtual.
Yeah?
There we go.
And,
It's our first, I don't know what to
well, you
expect.
should be there.
So,
We tell you.
it's the 9th, so as long as she's on time, like I always am, it'll be fine.
Well, and if something should happen, if Mr. Bino's comfortable coming by himself, he has that right and ability to do that.
Yeah, it would be the only reason I won't be here. That should work.
So it sounds like,
Yeah.
I would just call it 6:30, knowing that,
Yeah,
I'll try to ask Paul to make sure it's earlier on the agenda if that's the board's wish.
When do you want the additional materials?
Oh, that's a good question.
No, I was gonna ask.
Why I asked it.
What's, I guess, for the applicant? So in terms of meeting with you, My only available window is probably either 1 o'clock tomorrow or Thursday morning, and then I won't be back in town until like April 3rd.
And then do we need the materials turned in 2 weeks before? Will it be, 10?
Not
5 sets
necessarily.
of drawings?
How much time does the board want before the fourth meeting to
I'm good, like a
lead
week
time do you
before.
need?
I mean, if it's just that language,
Yeah,
I'm good the day before.
yeah.
I'd like it a week. A day can be kind of tight on schedules.
Well, and it helps it gives the public some lead time too, because we'll post it to the website. So you're saying you're
Like the
comfortable
Friday
with it?
before is fine with me.
It sounds like they'll probably have it to us before then, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So a week before the May 4th would be the
27th.
27th. Do you want to move it back to the 20th, just 2 weeks?
No, 27th is fine with
27th is
me.
good
You guys good with that?
for revised
April
materials?
Is it that
27th?
Friday, then. Can Mr. Benson have all the documents ready for us on Friday?
Yeah, one of us will make sure we get it out to you, whoever's in the office that day.
Okay.
And Joe, you said you were back in town when?
I'll be back Monday, the 3rd, or Tuesday, the
Okay,
4th.
We'll meet when you come back then.
Okay, yeah.
That's fine.
Perfect. He's allowed to go on vacation that long?
We working pretty hard. He deserves one.
They know it.
They know where I'm at.
Go very
You
often.
don't put him hard to work, we put him hard.
All right, so I'll move to continue the public hearing for the subject zoning map amendment, AKA rezoning and preliminary development plan application as requested by Daniel Bino, ZC case number 2022-07, also known as Multi-Sound Studios, until May 4th, 2023 at 6:30 PM in the Genoa Township Hall. Additional or revised materials will be due to the Genoa Township Development and Zoning Department by April 27th, 2023 at 4 PM. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Roll call, trustee Antonetts. Trustee Goodman.
Yes.
Trustee Vaughn.
Yes, motion carries. Can't turn the page fast enough. We just adjourning? Okay, I'll move to adjourn this meeting at 8:02 PM. Do I have a second? Roll call?
Trustee Antonetts. Trustee Goodman. Trustee Vaughn.
Yes, motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:02